Hey everyone, just wanted to go over the first discussion questions, the first few chapters, and just kind of give a few words on the book itself. Um, Catcher in the Rye is a very interesting book. I've obviously already shown you some of the stuff, the controversies, and the reasons why it's banned. Um, it'll be really interesting to see what you guys think of those parts when they come up. Um, but yeah, a lot of times it's thought of as one of the greatest novels written. And I think most people have this idea that Holden is just kind of an angsty teenager and they don't think much happens in the book. And uh, maybe Holden's a little bit of a hypocrite at times. We'll go over kind of all of this to some degree. But it's really interesting. First of all, if you think that, don't worry about it because you're in a class and you will actually get to see what's underneath that. I will just say that there is kind of a deeper thing a deeper psychological thing that's going on here with Holden's uh, hypocrite or hypocritical kind of nature. So hang tight on that. Keep that in mind. There's actually a few things I want you to keep in mind. Um, and as I've already said, there's a lot of this subtlety in Salinger's writing. And so when you read through it, you are definitely reading something and something kind of deeper than what it seems like. Um, so yeah, just kind of stick with it. We'll go over it. I'll do a lot more of these, and hopefully you'll kind of get into it more, and you'll see that subtlety. You'll see the meaning behind it, and things like that. Now, one more thing. There's a few symbols in here that, even just in the first few chapters, that I want you to start to pay attention to. The first one being, and perhaps the most obvious one, the one Holden is most known for, is the red hunting hat. I know I'm going to ask you questions about this a little bit later on, so hopefully you've kind of noticed uh, what it is when it kind of makes its appearance, and kind of what's going on with Holden at the time that he takes that out. Um, there's also another one that's just briefly in the first few chapters when he's talking to Mr. Spencer. He thinks about the ducks on what is it, on the lake in Central Park. He wonders if there's somebody that comes by in a truck and takes him to the zoo when the ice freeze or when the water turns to ice and there's no pond and water to swim in. He wonders if there's again a truck that takes him to the zoo or if they fly somewhere else and things like that. This idea of the ducks will come up more than once. Same thing with his red hunting hat. So take a look at those. Try to pay attention to what's going on with Holden, what's going on in the story, things like that. Okay, I'm going to go through the questions now. Where is Holden in the very beginning of the book? Where is he telling his story from? What first impression does this give you about Holden? You probably have several first impressions of Holden. I will kind of direct your attention to a couple of passages here as far as where is Holden. He's not at Pensy, not in the very beginning. If you really want to hear about it, the first thing you'll probably want to know is where I was born and what my lousy childhood was like and how my parents were occupied and all before they had me and all that David Copperfield kind of crap. Now, first of all, first line of the book has a swear word. At least it certainly was in the 1950s, which was one of the reasons why it was banned. Nowadays, certainly the word crap doesn't have the bite as some of our other swear words and curse words and things like that. So it already the reasons for banning a book are kind of questionable, to say the least. But going back to where he is and really stressing this idea of subtlety here, I'll just tell you about this madman stuff that happened to me around last Christmas, just before I got pretty run down and had to come out here and take it easy. So he says, come out here. He never explicitly says where out here is. It's not his home. It's not Pensy Prep. It's none of those places. Um, as to where, there's two other clues in that particular passage. Um, before I got pretty run down. This isn't like, oh, he got tired, so, he should go take a nap somewhere. Rundown is much more severe than what he's letting on to. I'll just tell you about this madman stuff that happened. So, madman stuff, him feeling run down, and now he's in a place that he's not necessarily familiar with. He doesn't really want to be there, right? He's talking about getting out. Um, basically, again, in a subtle way, he's in a mental institution. And this is where he starts the story. This will kind of bring up and conjure up all sorts of ideas, all sorts of first impressions of Holden and what happened. It also sets up an expectation. Um, that plus my idea of things are very subtle um, should hopefully prepare you well enough for what happens and paying attention to what happens. Um, now, the other part of this, he downplays it. He downplays the severity of his rundownness. Um, he uses kind of a casual or glib term of madmen for mental health issues. That wasn't a kind of thing of the times. That was much more Holden and his personality. In fact, there is an idea or a concept in literature called the unreliable narrator. So as we look at what Holden is doing and what he's saying and what he's going through, it's not enough for us, the reader, to take him at his word. We have to look to see what's going on, what Holden is doing, uh, and seeing if that measures up exactly to what he's saying and how he's feeling and things like that. Now, with the idea of the unreliable narrator, is that they're not going to match what's going on and how he's feeling about what's going on is not going to be matching. It's not going to be essentially reasonable. It's not how we would react to such things. And so it's kind of up to us to figure out kind of what is the truth here. If we can't trust Holden, and he may not be telling us I don't want to say the correct events. I'm sure everything in here is correct. Maybe not to the degree, maybe not to the severity, things like that. Maybe it's more severe as the uh, being institutionalized in the very beginning is probably a little more severe than he's letting on to. So uh, that's that. Um, it is a difficult thing. It increases the degree of difficulty for the novel, for reading it, and for reading what actually is happening to Holden. Um, but it makes it more of a challenge to see what's going on, to see that deeper meaning that I mentioned before. Number two, why does Holden leave Prency Prep? Well, he's basically being kicked out of it um, for, I'm sure, a few reasons. Um, Losing the fencing team's equipment, um, failing 4 out of 5 grades except English. Um, well, he did not attend. What was it, like a parent-teacher conference thing, um, where the school and his parents wanted to kind of convince him and maybe light a fire under his butt to uh, try to succeed in uh, Pensy. Um, and so it's probably a compounding thing. We also know that he has um, essentially been kicked out or failed out of 2 other schools. Can't remember one of them, but he mentions Wooten a couple of times. So not the first school that he's been kicked out of. He's been kicked out of, now we know, at least 3. And of course, from the very beginning, the first question, we also know that he's in a mental institution. So something important is happening here with him. Um, and it's going to be shown in very subtle ways. Number 3, who is Mr. Spencer? Do you think he's a good teacher or bad? What is significant about his relationship with Holden? I'll leave you to the do you think he is a good teacher or bad? But Mr. Spencer is his teacher for 2 of his classes, English and history. What is significant about his relationship with Holden? As you'll see, and as an unreliable narrator, Holden has, at least the way he kind of feels about people, he has this good and bad love-hate relationship with like everybody. This is part of where that hypocriticalness comes from. But he likes Mr. Spencer. He did well in one of his classes, but not the other, history. Um, he talks to him. He likes him. He met with him before getting kicked out and leaving. But there is this still kind of frustration or annoyance that Holden expresses um, with Mr. Spencer, certainly after a certain period of time. Um, Now, like I said, this is kind of a common thing. We'll see later on with Ackley and Stradlater. He kind of does the same thing. Um, let's see. I'll move on to what does Holden's interaction with Mr. Spencer tell us about Holden's view? So the end of 3 and end of 4, he he likes some subjects in school. Obviously, he passed his English class, and in fact, he's later reading Out of Africa, I think is the book. So he's a reader. He at least tolerates and tries in his English classes. And of course, that's kind of represented with Mr. Spencer. Mr. Spencer is also one of the, it seems like, few teachers that not only Holden likes, but he tries to reach out to Holden. He's trying to genuinely help him and kind of save him from uh, getting kicked out of Pensy, basically not simply ruining his own life. Um, but again, Holden reacts to that in a couple of different ways. First he said, he would he would have visited him, even if Mr. Spencer hadn't written him a note. So he's important enough to Holden to, uh, go visit, go say goodbye, and go talk to on his own. Um, but again, as we see, at a certain point, he gets tired of picking up the stuff and putting it on his bed when Mr. Spencer misses. He doesn't like him in a bathrobe. He doesn't like the smell of his house. And so he kind of creates this whole uh, I don't want to say he creates, but he gets into all of this frustration and like, oh, I don't like this anymore. I want to leave. And eventually he does. So he likes Mr. Spencer. Um, he's appreciative, I think, genuinely of Mr. Spencer's help, but he kind of does what he does with most people, which is uh, kind of finds a reason to leave the conversation, and finds reason to not necessarily like that other person after a while. And speaking of not liking people after a while, and fairly quickly, we have Ackley and Stradlater. What is Holden's reaction to each? So Ackley is a neighbor, one who he shares kind of a common bathroom with. Stradlater is his actual roommate. So again, Ackley, I think right now you get more of an annoyance, more so than anything else with Ackley. He's constantly complaining about his pimples, his annoying kind of personality. He'll often repeat himself, and he's cleaning under his fingernails with a matchstick, and kind of all these things. And generally, doesn't seem to like Ackley very much at all. Um, more bad than good to say about Ackley. Stradlater, he gets. I think he's a little more even. Um, he talks about him having, him being good looking, but he's not very intelligent, and so I think there's more of an evenness to his feelings on him. Um, we will see. We will see more of the interaction between him and the two essentially roommates, more so in other chapters. More will kind of come out from those interactions. So just kind of stay tuned and stay eagle eyed on those. The last one, last question here. Holden describes many people as phony. He even describes some words as phony. Um, this is one of those things. Being a phony is a huge part of the controversy of Holden's character, and things like that. So it's important to kind of go over and get out kind of right away. Holden describes many people as phony. What does he mean by this? Do you see anything wrong with calling others phony? Now, um, so what does he mean by phony? First off, um, he calls Ackley and Stradlater phony a lot. He calls the word grand phony a lot. Um, Speaking of grand, I think what he does is, when people say that, I think he sees grand as almost not really a false word. Like people use it to mean something great, but it's not really great. So phony is something that's very subjective to Holden. Um, you know, Other people may be genuine, certainly in their own eyes, but Holden seeing another side, or picking out, or nitpicking, if you will, these other aspects of people, um, whether it's Stradlater or Ackley, or even I think Mr. Spencer a little bit. He certainly criticizes Mr. Spencer for doing those things that teachers often do. Even I do it. Um, so it's kind of funny to read that aspect of it, at least. Um, but yeah, I think this is. I don't want to say he's calling BS on people. Um, I think there's something else involved. Um, Now, the last part of this question: do you see anything wrong with calling others phony? Um, some of you may see Ackley and Stradlater especially as maybe not so much phony, but just as a you know collection of characteristics, as we kind of all are. And this is where I think a lot of people see Holden as a hypocrite, because while he criticizes others for being phony, he kind of does the same things that he criticizes others for. Um, right. So there's a point where, oh, Ackley is always, saying something or repeating what he just said. And yet, Holden very often repeats things that he has already said. Um, and so there is this kind of hypocritical aspect to it. Um, and that's usually what people find annoying with Holden or hypocritical or whatever. So um, that's it. I think this really gets into the idea of the unreliable narrator, or at least there's something deeper there. Um, so that's it for these chapters. I'm going to go ahead and end it there. I'll get into a lot of these characters and, of course, getting into Holden a lot more as the book unravels and as, literally, uh, Holden's mental state unravels, as we know it will. So keep reading, keep keep up with trying to look at the subtleties, trying to kind of find the truth in these uh, scenes and these interactions, especially. And we will go on from there. So I will see you online. Take it easy.